By stressing yourself, your biological age will go down.
I'm an average person, a working professional. How do I personalize my diet?
From an evolutionary standpoint, being fat is healthy.
Yeah.
Pharma has created a drug which is trying to make you mindful of your food. Calories are a lie.
The most popular sport right now is paddle and pickleball.
The person who live for 150 years has already been born. All that organic food that we talk about is not really organic anymore. To delay aging, you need to keep building muscle.
You have a atta-based roti, there is going to be a glucose spike.
Sitting is the new smoking. There's a book that I read that really changed my life, and that's The Power of Habit. It moves the consumer to a healthier step. Even Snackible is a step to that evolution, right? 90% of what will happen inside your body is decided.
Hi, I'm Aditya Sanghavi, the founder of Snackible. Welcome to the second episode of The Balanced Bite. Today we have a very special guest with us, Anant Agarwal. He's the founder of a biotech company and his true passion lies in biohacking. Some key takeaways from this episode include mindfulness and its relationship with food, how fitness plays a very important role in longevity, supplement protocols that can help you with longevity, and glucose and insulin and their relationship with your health. Hi Anand, how are you? Great to have you on the Balanced Bite.
Aditya, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
No, super excited to dive into biohacking. Maybe you can start with a little bit around your journey and how did you get into biohacking?
So honestly, I started with clinical research. I fell into this project where we were injecting stem cells into patients, and we actually saw toes growing back, and it was a wonderful experience. But as and when we started doing more clinical research projects and we started working with pharma, I think something that we realized is that all these medicines are symptomatic cures. They are not curing your root cause of the disease. And that's when I started having a personal interest in biohacking, because medically, a human body can live for 120 years based on the telomere length that we have on the X and Y chromosome. But our life expectancy is somewhere between 60 to 80, depending on which country you live. So biohacking, the word itself, comes from the fact that we are not living up to our potential. So we need to hack our way to a higher level. Maybe 100, 110, 120. In fact, I would go to the extent of saying that they say that the person who lived for 150 years has already been born.
Wow, interesting. So maybe we can start with one piece which I thought was very interesting when we spoke initially. It was around breath work, right? You mentioned that most of us are breathing wrongly, right? So can you touch upon that a bit?
I think, so again, if I have to start from the base, I think something that you need to understand, why are we breathing incorrectly, right? This was not something which was very common before. It's very common now. So because food has got industrialized, because food has become something that is easily chewable, food has become something that you can drink. The whole process of using your mouth has gone.
Right.
And because of that, your lower jaws have become weak. I mean, I was speaking to a dentist in Bombay, actually, Dr. Nitika Modi. She's a very popular dentist. And she was telling me this, that 30 years ago or 25 years ago, 80% children had okay teeth and 20% needed alignment. Today, 80% to 90% children need alignment. Because they're having everything in liquid form, they're having everything in very soft form, because of which their jaws are becoming weak. And for correct breathing, your tongue needs to be on your upper palate.
Right.
And most people have their tongues in their lower palate. So in some form or the other, they're breathing through their mouth.
Right.
Air is going through the mouth. And if the air goes through the mouth, it'll be full of allergens and toxins, which will create a gut dysbiosis along with the processed food that people are having. So because of that, we are breathing incorrectly. And that is being the root cause of so many problems, so many modern problems that we are facing today. Because if I had to make a single statement, then the root cause of most diseases in the world are oxidative stress.
Wow. No, very interesting. And maybe what we can do is dive into mindful living, right? That's something that you stand by and propagate a lot. So can you elaborate on that?
I think for me, mindful living comes in the bracket of mental health, right? When you are mindful about something, right? When you're mindful about what you're eating, you will listen to your brain and you will eat according to what fills you. Like, For example, your stomach is the size of this arm, right? Like what I'm holding. That's the pouch. Now, when you're eating something, if you chew it enough, right, it'll make into a ball which will fit your stomach,
Right.
When we are not mindful about what we're eating, we are distending our stomach as big as possible, and we think that's normal. So today what has happened is most children and most millennials and most adults think of this as normal because their brain and their gut don't have a correlation. That's why we call it the brain gut axis.
Right.
Why do you think Ozempic has become famous? It's not because Ozempic is doing something wrong. Ozempic is making you mindful that your stomach is full. So what Ozempic really does, it produces GLP-1,
Yeah.
which basically sends a signal to your brain to produce the leptin hormone. The leptin hormone is what signals your brain that you're full, you can't eat anymore. So what Ozempic does, it is just reducing your appetite, right? So in a way, pharma has created a drug which is trying to make you mindful of your food, not for other things. I am saying do it naturally in this sense. If you are mindful enough, if you listen to your brain, if you listen to your body, you will know when to stop eating,
Right.
irrespective of what you're eating.
No, very interesting. Blue zones have been studied very a lot recently, and we have seen that social engagement plays a very important role for living over 100. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So let me give you a perspective of blue zones, right? So blue zones are certain locations all around the world where you find the maximum number of people who are living above 100, right?
Right.
Which is what the aim of human beings are, to live
Yeah.
above 100, right? If we can live 120 and you find people above 100, then you say it's a successful zone, right? So those success zones globally are called the blue zones. Now, based on the research that has been done in blue zones for the longest time, there are 3 or 4 factors which have come out which are very common. Number one, they all live intentionally, which means that they have a purpose for living, and that purpose is not necessarily a goal. It is not about winning something, right? It's an infinite game. It doesn't matter whether your children are alive or your partner is there or not or whatever. They have a function and purpose in life. That function and purpose is to wake up every day and have an intention of life. Like,
Right.
for example, if I wake up every morning, I feel like I'm transforming someone's health, right? And that needs to be my purpose. It doesn't matter whether my business shuts down.
And doesn't matter if you're 60 or 80 or whatever it may be.
I want to do this for the rest of my life as long as I live. My children could be there, not be there. My parents could be there, not be there. I'll be sad. But that doesn't mean that you stop living, right?
Right.
What we are doing right now is we are retiring at 60. We are telling our brain, oh, मेरी बेटी बेटा का शादी हो गया, अब सब settle हो गया, अब बस आराम करके मर जाए. And you will convince your brain that you will die.
Yeah.
And your brain will listen to you, right? Just like when you don't use your muscles become weak, right?
Yeah.
If I put you in bed for 24 hours, your muscles will become weak within 24 hours.
Of course.
Right? It's the same thing you're doing to your brain. You're saying, I'm retiring at 60. That means I have nothing to do.
Wow. Your brain is that powerful. Huh? And
Absolutely. 90% of your endocrine system comes from your brain. 90% of your hormones come from your brain. Your brain decides what it's going to do with the entire body.
right.
Right? And that's why mindfulness is very important with mental health. And then the second point that we come for the blue zones after purpose is social engagement. Right? Because they have a social circle, fun is a very important aspect of living. I think most city dwellers, most people who live in cities take pride in being exhausted, take pride in living stressful lives. You will find people, oh, I have 16 hours work a day, bro. That's not a good thing.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing in any standard, right? If you're working 16 hours, you're doing something wrong. I'm just sidetracking here.
Yeah.
I really want to put this
Feel free
point.
to.
I attended this workshop from this business coach, right? I usually don't believe in business coaches as such. I think everyone has their own experience. He's a very famous business coach in India. His name is Rahul Jain. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
From Delhi. Charges some 10-15 lakhs for a course a year. Anyway,
Wow.
like top people go to him. So he has this workshop or a program called Work One Day a Week, right? And double your profits. Like these and manifestation, these 3 programs he has. And a lot of people I know swear by him. So he got up and I understood where he's coming from. He got up and he said that how many of you can leave your businesses and go to say Bali for 6 months and probably like one or two people and they also second generation businesses, by the
Yeah.
way, not real entrepreneurs. And some two people raised their hand ki we can work probably. They said, all of you are employees. None of you are business owners. The purpose of business is to buy time. All of you are so busy that you'd rather do a job. I will teach you how to be a businessman, a business owner, because the intention of business is to buy time. I would say the same thing for health. When you are living your life, social engagement is that important. If you are saying you're working 16 hours, then you're a self-employed person or you're an employee, you're not a business owner.
Right.
If you're working so hard and stressing so hard because you are killing your time. By stressing yourself, your biological age will go down. And I trust me, you change your life for 2 years, you will see your telomere length will stop. You can't reverse anything. That's a propaganda health influencers use. You can only delay something, or you can put something in remission, right? So if your telomere length, say your biological age comes up to 45, right? You can stop that by not taking too much stress, by living a good life, and then catch up to it later. Right? But you can't reverse it. Very hardly can you reverse it. I mean, Brian Johnson claims that he has. I don't know how he did that, frankly. He claims to have done that, but since I don't have access to his data, so I can't say. But yeah, that's how important social engagement is.
No, very interesting take on the entire blue zone piece and the social engagement piece. Now, would love to maybe dive into diet, right, and its role in longevity. And I think most people today have used calorie deficit diets to lose weight or become fitter, right? I would love to understand your view on that, okay, on what is a calorie and is calorie deficit the most efficient way to be healthy and fit?
So there was this line which I really like. It's like, if you eat less and move more, you lose weight. If you eat less, move more, and lift, you will lose fat. If you eat less, move more, lift weight, and eat more protein, you'll gain muscle, lose fat, lose weight.
Wow.
So, I mean, just this is a very summation of what I'm trying to say. But I'll summarize this into my personal 3 statements that yes, the law of thermodynamics do apply. You need to be in calorie deficit. The second statement that I'll make is calorie deficit should come from movement, not food. And the third thing that I'll say, and it could be slightly controversial, that calories are a lie. And let me explain my third statement. So a calorie is energy, right? Say you want to find out the calorie in this piece of chips, right? So what we will do is we'll take this chip, we'll put it in a bomb calorimeter,
Okay.
right? We'll heat it from below, right? Of course, it will generate some heat, right? So when it generates heat, right, the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 kg of water by 1 degree Celsius in 1 atmospheric pressure, which we are breathing right now, is 1 kilocalorie.
Very interesting.
So now I ask you, are you a bomb calorimeter?
No.
Of course not, right? When we eat something, it is based on the efficiency of your body to consume that calorie in whichever way your brain desires. 90% of your endocrine system is in your hypothalamus and your pituitary gland, right? The way it produces testosterone, the way it produces calcium, the way it absorbs vitamins, the way your gut microbiota is, everything is based on that. An athlete can take up to 6,000 calories a day and burn it off, right?
Right.
You could have 800 calories and still be fat. Do a thought experiment. Take 10 different people with the same weight and give them food, right? And see if their weight changes in the same ratio or not. It won't.
Of course, yeah.
Calories
It also
so
depends on your
instantaneous.
BMR, the basal metabolic rate as
Even
well.
that is dynamic. You might measure it. In fact, that will change with your cortisol. If you're stressed, your BMR will change.
Right.
If you're very happy or if you're on vacation, your BMR will change. You will notice that you can eat more on vacation
Yeah.
without gaining weight. And you could smell a pizza and gain weight when you're in the city, right? So for me, calories are, again, it comes from how you move. Because when you're moving, you're less stressed. When you're moving, you're more mindful, right? Because you can't move without not being conscious.
Right.
Because if you're moving, you can't hit a wall, right? when you're moving, when you're walking, like, they've started saying that sitting is the new smoking, right? They have those standing tables now.
Yeah.
That's because when you're moving, you're more mindful.
Right.
You're less stressed because you are thinking about whether, you don't want to hit into something, right? When you're sitting, the only thing that you're doing is creating stress in your brain, right? So calorie deficit should come from movement because hormones are made of proteins and fats. Uh, if people don't intake food, or if they don't intake calories, hormone production will also go down. Your metabolism, they talk about the BMR.
Yeah.
If you start having 800 calories, your metabolism will make you lose weight up to a certain point. You can't vanish, right?
Of course.
Your body will want to be in homeostasis. So because your body will want to be in homeostasis, your BMR will also become 800. Try it. You can't vanish, right? If today you start having 200 kilocalories a day, if you start fasting for 30 days, are these 30-day water fasts, right?
Yeah.
Very good for health. I mean, for some people not, for some people, yes.
Autophagy and all
Yeah,
of
there are a
that.
lot of benefits, and then there are a lot of nuances which we can get to later.
Right.
But if you do a 30-day fast reset, I mean, do you vanish? Do you become Mr. India?
You lose muscle
That's
mass, a
because
lot of
you
muscle
lose
mass.
a muscle
Yeah.
mass, you lose a lot of fat also. But your metabolism is also functioning, right?
It
Your
adapts,
metabolism
basically.
also goes down.
And the same must be applying the opposite way. Like you mentioned, athletes consume around 6,000 calories. I'm sure they may not be burning necessarily 6,000 calories, right?
Yeah.
So,
The way they store the calories is very different from the way we store it. Like,
Right.
if you study metabolism on a very cellular level, on a scientific level, proteins can also become glucose, fats can also become glucose, and carbs can also become glucose. There's a process called deaminase in which proteins becomes carbs
right.
in the liver. So, it depends
your-
on how your calories being consumed, what vitamins and minerals you're consuming. Like, for example, if you have a bad gut microbiota, you will not be able to synthesize good vitamins out of it.
Right.
You will not be able to absorb the right nutrients out of it. You might be taking 10 or 100 grams of protein, but you might be able to absorb, say, 50. You might think that, oh, I'm having 2 vegan protein shakes every day, but I'm still not gaining muscle. Right? Your muscles, your fibers, your cells have to be aligned with each other in proper ratio, because if you're athletic, you can have 10,000 calories and just burn it all. Like when you were a kid, you might have had so many meals, like you might have had those days where you might have had 4,000, 5,000 calories you don't even know. But your
Definitely.
pancreas were efficient enough to burn it all, right? The idea is to create efficiency on an endocrine level, on a hormonal level, and your hormones or testosterone will deplete as a man if you are not eating enough calories. If you have 1,000 calories per day, rest assured you're already losing testosterone of 1% every year. After 30, you'll start losing more.
Right.
Again, ED has become a bigger problem in 25-year-old today. Diabetes is now diagnosed at 22-year-olds, which was a 50-year-old disease. Our target for diabetes was that by 2030 we wanted that in fact we had projected that there will be 100 million people having diabetes in India by 2030. Today is 2024, we've reached that target and more.
Wow.
We have 120 million.
And we are the diabetes capital of the world, I guess.
Absolutely. And we are a malnourished country. Can you
That's
believe that?
surprising,
A
yeah.
malnourished country, being the second most obese nation in the world, right? And being the diabetic capital of the world, it just doesn't make sense. That's because of processed food. That's because of the ingredients that we are using. It's because of so many other factors. I mean, there's stress, there's politics, there's economics, there's policy, there's so many things, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think one more reason is also Indians have a very high carbohydrate diet, and because of that, the protein content that they consume is also very less, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, I feel that, again, like I would say that for me, sugar has no nutritive value, right? Like, and I'm talking about table sugar here, sucralose and glucose, the combination of sucrose and glucose, sorry.
Yeah.
So basically, sugar has no nutritive value. I think that everything else taken in different colors and taken in different proportions help. Yes, we are deficit in protein for sure, and I think as a nation we need to start increasing that more. But again, if you look at the history of India, if you look at the Ayurvedas or the homeopathies and all the kind of food that we've been having for 100 years, I think we were also moving a lot. Like
Right.
I said, again, we were exercising a lot, we were moving a lot, we had a hard life. Whatever we ate was digested. But now we are living in a world, in a country rather, that is not being able to get enough protein because we're not moving enough also.
Right.
Our muscles are also becoming weak.
Yeah.
We're not being able to absorb the protein also if you're having it.
Right. So your suggestion is basically focus on movement more than what you're consuming, but somewhere there has to be a balance as well. I'm assuming because movement. Just to give you an example, like a 1 hour walk will be what 400 calories. Maybe a run for half an hour will be roughly similar, right? And that's typically the movement that an average person, working professional, working 8 to 9 hours a day can plug into their day-to-day workout, right? My take is that again, law of thermodynamics, right? So somewhere, is that enough to create a deficit, right? And do they need to maybe start focusing on the quality of calories, one, and maybe somewhere bring in some balance in terms of diet, right? I'm not saying that don't consume enough calories, but the quality of the calories and maybe the amount of calories has to be controlled to a certain extent.
So absolutely, you're right.
Yeah.
And maybe like because of the answers I gave before, it might be slightly misleading about what I'm about to say. So basically for me, food is about relationship. If you've seen that interview, I don't remember if it's Roger Federer or Nadal,
Yeah.
where he says that for 12 years I didn't give myself a piece of chocolate.
Djokovic, I think it's Djokovic.
Maybe
yeah.
Djokovic. He said
Yeah.
for 12 years I
And then
didn't
when he
give my
won, I think the Wimbledon or something, he had a
one
bite.
piece of chocolate.
Yeah.
Right? Which tells you his reward center was sugar.
Right.
Right? His reward center is still sugar, which means that maybe one day he leaves the sport, he'll have as much as he wants.
Right.
Because his purpose will be lost at that point of time. So for me, food is about relationship building. The way I would want to suggest someone is start building a relationship with food which is not gluttony, which is not overeating, because no diets in the world have worked.
Yeah.
Like, I'm being very blunt about it, whether it's a keto diet, whether it's a vegan diet, whether it's a vegetarian diet, whether it's a carnivore diet. Diets only work for the amount of days you do it for. Only sustainability works, right? I'm not saying that don't change your diet. I'm saying change your relationship to the diet. It's almost like, there's a book that I read that really changed my life, and that's The Power of Habit,
Yeah. I've read
right?
it.
So it's basically the way you build habits is the way you build habits with food.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even realize that the moment you're hungry, you go and reach onto certain things that might not be a very healthy choice, but you forget about it because, you don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Right? So for me, relationship with food building is very important. What do you go back to? Right? What is the comfort food that you go back to? I'm saying I will be successful if I change the comfort food that person goes back to.
Right.
Right? Having dal chawal is perfect. It's a complete amino acid profile. No problem. Having cake as a reward or having sugar as a reward, that relationship needs to change.
Yeah.
You need to make your own decision. When husband wives have fights where the wife says that, I want you to want that, and I don't want me to tell you to want that.
Right.
Right? This is a very common fight
Yeah.
that different partners have, right? It's the same thing. It's not about you following a certain diet. I want you to want that diet. I want you to want that diet to satisfy you. It's like when you wake up in the morning, you should feel, I love my life, I love my diet. Like, if you feel that you're in some form of deficit, your brain will take revenge at some point. Because your brain is a preserver. It likes homeostasis. It does
Right.
not like to change. That is why your brain resists fat loss. Because it doesn't like to change. Because from an evolutionary standpoint, being fat is healthy.
Yeah.
Because if you're fat, you can survive a famine. 50 years ago, we used to have floods and famines,
Right.
right? And today, switch back today, there are like chip stores and like junk food at every nook and corner, right? Because that food, we have not been able to match up to that,
Yeah.
right? And that is why fat has now become an evil. Imagine not being able to have food in the entire winters. You do a 30-day fasting because you didn't have availability of food.
Yeah.
So being fat was actually genetically, so we haven't been able to adapt to that, like that food cycle. So I think for me, food is a relationship-based argument. Yes, there are certain rules that I would follow. The first thing is try and have local food. try and adding fermented foods to your diet, try and adding a high number of fruits and vegetables to your diet. We live in an equatorial plane, so equatorial plane would Mediterranean again would be famous. Try and having more plant food, try and having healthier snacks. Again, changing your relationship with food is very important. But yes, these rules and regulations have to be followed. You do have to have high plant material. You do have to have, a good amount of protein. These are the things that you need to incorporate in terms of a relationship and habit building.
Right. No, very, very interesting, I think, insight on calories overall. And I think good takeaways also at the end. So now can we move on a bit to personalization of diet, right? I think that's something which you highlighted a lot. But like, say, if I'm an average person, a working professional, how do I personalize my diet? Like, how do I know what should I eat, and how do I know if that is satisfying me or not, right? Like obviously by default, because of my dopamine receptors, I will gravitate towards sugar by default. So how do I create a guideline for myself to ensure that I'm eating healthy, right?
I think for me, I think something that I've always followed is never delete something from your life. Substitute it with something else. Like I'm giving a very silly example. Say you love Coke or like all the sugary drinks. Maybe replace it with Diet Coke.
Right.
Better than having Coke, right? I'm not justifying all the preservatives and chemicals that everything have, but I mean, I'm just saying that a person needs to start by changing basic habits. They need to find alternatives. Like for example, a very good biohack for normal noodles is the konjac flour noodles,
Right.
the shirataki noodles.
Shirataki, yeah.
The shirataki noodles have 90%.
It's like some 60 calories or
No, it's
lesser than that.
97% water and 3% fiber. In
Yeah.
fact, it has almost no calories.
Wow.
Right. I'm just again giving you an example. Like
No,
if
I can-
patients came to me, I would be like, try substituting the things you love with healthier alternatives. Try it. Slowly and steadily, as they build into that, as they accept that as their main diet, as they start finding that tasty,
Right.
I think that's when their brain will start thinking about finding healthier alternatives to everything, and that's how the diet will change.
And I think the brain will change the reward centers as well based on that.
Absolutely.
So can completely relate, and even the Diet Coke example that you gave, I think we were discussing this earlier as well, that there's a lot of misinformation as well. Like people say that Diet Coke is bad because of the aspartame, but the quantities of aspartame you have to consume, how the quantities of Diet Coke you have to consume to actually get the negative effects of aspartame are extremely high, if I'm not
180
mistaken.
cans. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
In fact, I mean, it's not to just promote your brand, and I'm not trying to placate you, but even Snackable is a step to that evolution, right?
Definitely,
I mean,
yeah.
if you look at consumer behavior, you can't be like, oh, stop this and start having all these 100 supplements and just become the healthiest person on earth. You can't change that in people.
Completely agree, yeah.
Right? So, Snackable as your brand, when you said that it's not deep fried, it's air fried, or these are made of healthier materials, or these are made of more fiber rich materials, what happens is it moves the consumer to a healthier step.
Right.
That's step one. Then there's always version 2. There will be version 3. There'll be version 4. There will be a time I see 10 years down the future where you will have to adapt to the consumer market, right?
Definitely, and we have evolved so much over time. Just to give you an example, you were mentioning frying and all. I remember when I started the business in 2015, the market was so different, the consumer preferences were so different that the only question we used to be asked, when we used to do those pop-ups and events, is this fried or baked, right? Or fried or roasted, right? Today, I mean, the consumer has become so educated about labels, about the fats being used, the macros of the snack, the ingredients which are going in, and I think it's a great step forward for us as an industry, and makes us feel that we are part of this entire evolution as well. And like you mentioned, snacking again, for example, the ads that we run right on Meta and Facebook, Instagram, the videos that work the best for us are the videos which are about replacing that afternoon snack with something healthier.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, you can't eliminate snacking, right? Unless you're on some 2-meal diet or some intermittent fasting where daytime you don't eat anything, it's impossible to eliminate snacking. And if you start doing that, your brain starts taking revenge, like you mentioned, right? So the best way to convince a customer who's looking for healthier options is to tell them that, hey, don't eliminate it, just replace what you're eating. And
Absolutely.
that's been our motto from day one. And great to see that, I can relate
Because
with.
that's the right step to take. What happens is that when like you go to health influencers and they rubbish everything and they say this is packaged, this packaged and everything is packaged and
Yeah,
processed.
yeah.
Like even the natural foods are packaged and processed. In fact, I was telling you that most of the crops that we have are genetically modified. Like all that organic food that we talk about is not really organic anymore. So taking the first step, creating an alternative is the first step, because what will happen next, they'll ask you for a healthier alternative.
Yeah.
When a larger consumer will say that, oh, now we are on Snackable, or maybe the competing brands that have healthier products,
Yeah.
then there will be a next step in evolution. Now we want this to have high protein. Now we want this to be made certain way, and then you will adapt to that market.
So eventually, everything ties into the mindful living bit, which we were discussing, right? You create alternate reward centers in your head, right? In your mind. You become more mindful about the kind of calories you're consuming, right? And essentially live your life more mindfully.
No, absolutely. So what happens is that, again, like I said, your relationship with food needs to change with uh, your own happiness, in the sense that you should be happy with what you're eating every day. Like, because if you feel deprived, your brain will eventually take revenge
Yeah.
from you. So, there was this experiment done at Stanford, which Huberman talked about in one of his videos, since we both are Huberman
Yeah.
fans. I just like for the viewers to just repeat that experiment. So, what they did was they did a milkshake experiment. So, they divided an auditorium into two sets of 100 people. They gave milkshakes to both the people. To one set of audience, they said that it's a healthy milkshake. And to the other set of the audience, they said that this is a very fatty, carbohydrate rich milkshake, right? It was the same milkshake, right? The people who thought that they were having a healthy milkshake did not have an insulin or glucose spike. For the people who thought that this was a very heavy fatty milkshake, who thought that they were indulging in too much, had a very high glucose spike,
Wow.
had a very high insulin spike. So it was just, again, it was a very small experiment. It's not something that is peer reviewed as such. But these things just prove how important your mind is. The same thing that happened with creatine. Like, how creatine is very good for cognitive function,
Yeah.
right? So they say that creatine is also helpful for muscle building, right? For people who thought that they were on placebo but actually were on creatine, did not build muscle. But the same people who were on creatine and knew they were on creatine build muscle.
Wow.
So, like your mind is the most powerful endocrine organ. Your pituitary and your hypothalamus produce 90%. 90% of what will happen inside your body is decided by them.
Very interesting. In fact, I came across something on social media where essentially the person, I don't remember who it was, even if you think about working out and doing weight training, they did an experiment again, and people actually gained muscle mass by just thinking about working out and weight training.
I personally believe that consciousness is very strong. And while I have not read that study or that experiment, but it could be widely true for sure.
Very interesting. Okay, now getting into the macros, right? And overall, education is so important when it comes to mindful living, right? It's easy to say, listen, just be mindful about what you're eating. But like you mentioned, you talk to your patients and tell them that it's a 1 year process. You educate them about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, right? I'm sure you all go into the macros, right? So can you elaborate a little bit about how education is important in this process?
So let me explain this in a very short and structured manner. Like, in terms of food or nutrition, there are 2 to 3 segments. The macros, which is like carbohydrates, proteins, fats.
Yeah.
Then there are your micros, which are the vitamins and minerals. And then there are trace elements,
Okay.
right? So as a person who needs to have all of it, right? Those are the things how you plan. Like when it comes to carbohydrates, sugar does not have any nutritive value,
Yeah.
right? But fiber does. You need to have fruits and vegetables to get at least 40 grams of fiber per day. So you don't think about how many carbs you're having. What you need to think about that 40 grams of fiber you're having, 20 grams of insoluble fiber and 20 grams of soluble fiber, right? And then we discuss sources of, these are the sources of soluble fiber and these are the sources of insoluble fiber. It does not matter how many complex carbohydrates you're having from that. If this much amount of fiber you're having is good, it'll help in peristalsis, which is basically keeping your gut clean, right? That's what we talk about in carbohydrates. We do not talk about the other things. Then when it comes to protein, it's a very common knowledge today that you need 1 gram of minimum protein per kg of your body weight, your ideal body weight.
Yes.
And you should have that much amount of protein. Then we discuss based on what their preferences are, whether they're vegetarian, whether they're vegan, or whether they are non-vegetarian, what are the different sources that they can incorporate in their life.
Right.
And if say they're having say 60-70% less protein, it's not something that you quickly change tomorrow and jump from 40 grams to 80 grams or 40 grams to 100 grams. It's something you slowly build into so that your digestive system can also adapt to that change slowly.
And how do you do that? Especially, for example, we have one of the largest vegetarian populations in the world, right? And in a vegetarian diet, it is believed that it's very difficult to get enough protein, one in quantity, and second in terms of bioavailability. So can you elaborate on those 2 points a bit?
So basically, for me, it doesn't matter whether you're a vegan or a vegetarian or a non-vegetarian. The only difference in terms of protein is the time and effort you put and the money you put, right? If you're someone who's vegan or someone who's vegetarian, they can get enough protein. I'm assuming that they have enough money. Again, like if you're talking in terms of a mass population, it's a very different ball game, because then it would be like soy and working out and all those things. Sattu and like those natural resources, because laborers have the highest muscle mass. They don't have money.
Yeah.
Right? They do it purely out of their brain and their testosterone levels and the way they utilize those carbs. Right? They burn everything they eat. They'll have heaps of rice and they'll burn everything they eat. So here I'm talking about, say, a rich population, right? Someone who's watching a podcast right now.
Right.
So for people who are watching a podcast, for people who can afford it, I think it doesn't matter whether you're vegetarian, vegan or non-vegetarian. Time, effort and money are all it takes. If you have the knowledge of what your protein sources are, where you will get bioavailability, I think that is just an education process. Once you know that these are my sources and this is how much I need to eat, I think you can just choose and pick and choose. It's like having a better choice education.
Yeah.
Like if you go somewhere and if you know that I need, say, a certain amount of protein, you know which choices to make.
Yeah.
You will go to those places. You will not go to those other places.
Yeah.
Right?
But there's so much misinformation also out there, right? When it comes to protein, that a typical viewer may find it difficult to break through that clutter, right? So do you have any advice in terms of, let's assume, because we are talking about vegan and vegetarians, do you have any advice for them, basic things that they can consume which adds to their protein intake in a day?
So for vegetarians, I mean, most of the protein sources come from milk, which is basically your paneer, your chena, and all those things. If you can't have those, if you're lactose intolerant, then you could go to soy-based products.
Tofu and
and soy, all soy-based products.
Yeah.
So you can go to soy-based products. If you're also allergic to soy-based products and milk-based products, you also have hemp-based protein.
Okay.
Right? And plant-based proteins like pea protein, brown rice protein isolates that are available. So I think for anyone who is a vegetarian or vegan who wants to complete their protein sources, they can pick either milk-based protein, they can pick soy-based protein, or they can pick plant-based proteins. And the ratio and combination with which they require depends on their body weight, which is basically 1 gram per kilogram of their body. 1 gram of protein per kg of the body in a day. And what I would suggest is that if you are deficit by say 50-60%, don't go to 100% the next day. Slowly and steadily keep increasing it at 4-5-10% every week, and then get on to 100% so that your body can adjust to it.
Right. And by default, if a person increases their protein is also in the form of calories, right? I mean, 4 calories, and carb is also 4 calories. So if they increase their protein, by default they are reducing their carbs maybe and reducing their fats, right? Because all the macros have to tie in together and create your entire 2000 or 2500 calorie input, right, into your body. So won't that help them in their fat loss journey, weight management journey as well?
I think fat loss, I mean, I use the word fat loss because I hate the word weight loss, because fat loss is what all our aim is, to get rid of the unnecessary fat that we have. I think fat loss is a process which is very complicated, in the sense that it cannot be summarized in terms of food as per se. Because for the correct amount of fat loss, You need to have the right amount of insulin. You need to have the right amount of glucagon. You need to have the right amount of testosterone to build the muscle, because you might have the right amount of protein and fat, and you might have enough protein to build muscles, but if your testosterone is low, you will not build muscle, right? You will not break fat. So basically, you need fats and proteins to build testosterone, which then helps you build your muscle, right? So fat loss is a very nuanced and complicated topic, because you need your endocrine system to be functioning correctly. You need your thyroid to be functioning correctly. You need your metabolism to go correctly. Because when you're in calorie deficit, you can also start losing muscle. Say if you're running, you lose muscle, you won't lose fat. You might think you're losing fat, but you're actually losing muscle. Right? So fat loss in a particular cannot be achieved alone through nutrition. This is my personal take. You cannot just sit at home, just have less food, have enough protein and lose fat. I think you will lose weight.
Yeah.
Fat loss comes when you have thermic energy in your muscles, when you start producing a lot of vibrations, when you start moving a lot, because when your muscles generate more heat, that's when your brown cells and white fat cells are activated, and that's when you start utilizing the fat, because your glycogen or your carbohydrate stores from your muscles start depleting away. So the only sources of fuel that remain are fats. So when fat is used as fuel, that is when fat loss happens. If you stop fat today, but you're just sitting the whole day, right? You will not lose fat. That will just be stored away, because fat loss don't even have strong nerve endings.
Yeah.
If you run, like you'll see that people don't lose their belly fat very often. They lose all the fat. Their face fat will go away, their back fat will go away, leg fat will go away. But belly fat and hip fat remain. That's because that's useless fat. The body is just there. The nerve endings also don't reach. That's the last fat that will be used when all the fat reserves have been used up. In
And
the body.
is that brown? I think there's brown fat or something
No,
like
that's
that.
subcutaneous fat.
Yeah.
Subcutaneous fat is just the fat between the skin.
Right.
That's the hardest to lose. And you need a lot of persistence and a lot of consistency to lose
Right.
that last amount of fat. But again, it's like your relationship with your body and your relationship with food has to really change over time. Like
Yeah.
I know I've said this a lot in this podcast, but I feel like there is no linear progression. It's always an up and down, up and down, up and down. And it's at some point, if you're consistent enough, right? If you're conscious enough, if you're mindful enough, you'll reach a baseline.
Yeah. No, completely agree, because again, having struggled with weight all my life, I know that it's never a linear curve, right? You have to keep experimenting. The key is to not stop experimenting, right? Until you hit baseline. Most people, I think what happens is they try 2 things, 3 things, and they're like, hey, I'm not being able to lose weight, period, right? Whereas you have to keep trying what works for your body, keep educating yourself, and somewhere you'll figure out what works, right? And then you have to just be consistent.
You know, a lot of patients, most patients think of weight loss as कि मेरी बहन का शादी है उसके लिए 5 kg कम करना है. You know, I know I'm putting
It's
it in a
very
very mild
event
manner.
and milestone
Yeah, it's
based,
very
yeah.
event and milestone based. Usually people don't think about their health, and probably because, like, and it's not just about India. I think it's any country,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Unless something bad happens to you, unless you get a heart attack or some life-threatening event, you can't get health conscious unless your parents are very health conscious.
Yeah.
Unless you've seen your parents that way, right? Like who've been very health conscious, and you think that that's what my life is. I mean, for me personally, I'm health conscious because I've seen my entire family being very unhealthy.
Right.
And I see the 100 tablets they take in a day and the 10 diseases they have, and that's why I'm conscious, So I think as far as changing your body is concerned, I think it's very important for them to start considering that health is an infinite game. There is no goal. It is to live to your maximum potential with your best quality of life, where you enjoy your life, where you have fun, where you don't feel depleted in life. And I think when that happens, people will reach baseline. Because right now we're very goal oriented.
Yeah.
I'm again a little sidetracking a little bit, but I have to say this for my audience because this is something that has changed my life completely. There is a book called Finite Games versus Infinite Games.
Okay.
Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
So there's a book called Finite versus Infinite Games, and it's by James Carsey. This was written in 1986, and he defined how the world needs to be viewed, right? And then Simon Sinek bought it out in public, and he made it very popular. He's one of my favorite motivational
Even
speakers.
I like him a lot. I didn't know he was basing all this on that book.
Yes, so he was
The
basing on
purpose
that.
and why
Yes.
and yeah.
So basically, there is a finite versus infinite game. Just for the audiences who are listening, a finite game is when there are two finite players, right? When we watch a game of cricket, one team scores 100, the other team needs to score 101. It's a finite game. The rules are defined. One team wins and one team loses, right? An infinite game is where the players keep replacing each other. The game doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Life, health, businesses, right? Like if you see the stock markets every 20 years, the top three businesses have always changed. Always changed. There is no company in the world which has remained in the top three for the last 40, 60, 80 years.
Yeah.
Right? Today, Elon Musk is there. After 20 years, it'll be Boston Dynamics, maybe.
Yeah.
You know? So it might keep changing every 20 years, right? It's an infinite game, but you keep playing the game.
Right.
Right? Health is the same thing. There is no end goal here. You're dying. Right? It's a finite, infinite game. You are going to die, irrespective of how much you take care of your health, irrespective of how you're trying to avoid that chocolate in front of you. Right? You're ultimately going to die. Your goal needs to be a good quality of life. Your goal needs to be surviving happily. Once you've accepted that surviving happily, not feeling deficit is your goal and your way to survive for the next 100, 120, 150 years of age, that's when you start enjoying your life.
Right.
Because right now you're depleting yourself. You're thinking, oh, the moment I reach 85 kgs, then I'll start balancing. Because right now I need to lose those 10 kgs. Those 10 kgs will lose automatically if you start thinking of life differently.
Yeah.
And I think that's very difficult to achieve for a larger population. And that's what we're trying to educate people on.
No, and completely agree. I think it's a great way to put that point across. And even those people who actually lose weight using short-term milestones, very good chance they gain it back eventually. And that's what makes it even more evident.
I even have data to support that. Like there's a meta-analysis of millions of patients who've lost weight. There's a meta-analysis on examine.com, which even Huberman uses, is basically that only 8% of people who lose their weight retain their lost weight.
8%.
8%, right? Anyone who loses weight will gain back it. The only 8% out of which 2% are either diseased or 6% are working out. And that's why, this is something that I read 10 years ago. Never realized it, but read it 10 years ago. And this has stayed with me even now. That the only way to functionally maintain your lost weight is happiness, social engagement, and movement. I'm not saying food is not important. It's a very important aspect of your life. Because food is a very social, very cultural thing.
Right.
But food needs to be a part of your social program. Food needs to be a part of your happiness program. Food needs to be a part of your cultural identity. Food needs to be something that you make better choices intentionally. Food has to come with intentionality. Like for example, like say if you're traveling, right? You might want to poop if you have a lot of coffee, right?
Yeah.
You might say, listen, I need to travel. I'll not have coffee right now. I'll have coffee later, right? You are living with intentionality. You're choosing not to have coffee that time, right? It's the same way with life. If you intentionally make choices so that you can engage better, move better, feel better, that's when you actually reach the pinnacle of the right kind of nutrition that is right for you.
Wow. No, very interesting. And in fact, moving on, you mentioned something about fat loss, right? So moving on to, your body's way of burning fat, one method used and which has become extremely popular in the last 10 years or so is intermittent fasting, right? Again, can you explain what happens in your body when you fast?
So I'll give you a very medical analysis first, and then we'll get into the spiritual and religious aspect of it. So basically, if you look at the history, intermittent fasting is a way to be in ketogenesis.
Yeah.
Right? And ketogenic diets were made for epilepsy, right? Because what happens is when you've not eaten for a certain amount of time, there is glycogen, which is basically the carbohydrates in your muscles, which get used up. The
And then
glucagon
your body
goes up.
moves to fat. Yeah.
Then the body starts to move to fat as fuel, and your brain loves fat. Like fat for your brain is the best thing. Like how mothers before examinations give their children food, that's the worst thing to do. Before exams, if they are on fasting, they'll have the best presence of mind you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
right? At least 12 to 14 hours of fasting. So intermittent fasting comes with the concept of calorie deficit, comes with the concept of ketogenesis, comes with the concept of using fat as fuel, right? So if you talk about intermittent fasting in general, I think it's a great way to reset your body, right? It's a great way to start using fat as fuel in your body, and great way to start moving better and start feeling healthy, because it is a great way to make your mind more mindful. Because if you're using fat as fuel, you are very conscious of what's going on.
Right.
You're very aware of what's going on around you, because you're not distracted by eating food.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the important things. And when your brain is very active, right, it makes you more mindful as a person. And when you're mindful as a person, you start making better choices.
Yeah.
So intermittent fasting was being used for millennia in terms of religious fasting and spiritual fasting and all those things in different religions all across.
Right.
That's also because food wasn't available back then,
Yeah.
right? But it was also a way to detox your body of the fat so that you could move better.
Yeah.
When your brain is working better, you're moving better, right? So intermittent fasting in general, if I put it very medically, if I say it in the words of Huberman or Peter Tia, is just a calorie deficit,
Right.
right? And there are a lot of nuances to intermittent fasting. While it helps men a lot, there is a lot of research currently that says that a lot of women should not fast that much,
Okay.
especially in the morning time. Because with women, cortisol increases a certain hormonal level in their body, which men can take, but women can't. Like men also have a testosterone buildup in the morning,
Right.
for which a morning fasting would be great for them, right? Then there is a question of fasted exercise versus non-fasted exercise. I think these are very nuanced topics which require a lot of introspection, and it's very individual based. But for me, intermittent fasting is, again, comes with the concept of mindfulness, where I feel eat when you're hungry. If you can detect when you're really hungry and not thirsty, because
Right.
thirst is also like your brain thinks that you're hungry when you're actually thirsty,
Yeah.
right? So for me, intermittent fasting is a great way to make yourself mindful. And once you're more mindful, you start making better choices. It's a good way of calorie deficit. It's a good way of fat loss. But at the same time, I feel that intermittent fasting and exercising should come hand in hand for fat loss.
Yeah.
And as far as the negatives are concerned, I think a lot of people who have gut issues should not fast. A lot of people who are on multiple medications should not fast, because it will create a very bad leaky gut if they are on medicines, because there are certain medicines which get absorbed with food. If you're taking vitamin D supplements, it will get washed away from your body if you're not having food. So because they're all fat soluble vitamins. So if you're on multiple supplements, if you're on multiple medications, you should not fast.
So, Anand, there's another concept of autophagy which happens when you are on a fasted state. So, can you explain what happens in your body when you are in a state of autophagy?
So basically, like before I explain this, like I just like to say that like there were these two scientists who won a Nobel Prize for discovering autophagy, and this was as recent as 2015.
Okay.
Now, so basically, just to talk about it in a very simple sense, autophagy is basically when the senescent cells or the bad cells that gets accumulated in your body, bad cells like cells that don't damage cells or cells that are about to die, they get accumulated in the body. And autophagy is a way of fast tracking that repair, right? So when we are fasting for a long time, then what happens is that after 16, 18 hours, your autophagy starts, or after 20 hours, maybe, I'm a little confused. But autophagy starts where basically all your damaged cells start getting replaced by new ones,
Okay.
start getting replaced by healthy ones, and it's a great way to reset your body. Let me explain this with a different example, right? Say, for example, if you have a 4-bedroom apartment, right, and your entire family lives in one room, right? Entire family eats there, drinks there, talks there, socializes there, everything, right? The person who'll come and clean your house will only concentrate on that room. The rest of the rooms will get neglected, right? That is the concept of autophagy. So what happens is that when we are eating all the time, our entire body system is concentrated on digesting our food. The gut microbiome is concentrating on digesting food. Your body is processing on digesting the food, and then you're thinking about the next meal that you'll have, right?
Right.
They say that human beings keep thinking about the next meal that they'll have, right?
Yeah.
Autophagy is a state of your body when you're not eating at all. So your body has all the time to look at every part of your body. They will look at the first room, the second room, the third room, and the fourth room. And then they will start cleaning them out. And that is what the process of autophagy is. They'll repair everything.
And the cleaning process, how does it aid you in your life?
No, so basically what happens is that again, like if when we are eating all the time, a lot of times we are accumulating the damaged cells and they are just retaining with us. And at some point they go bad and develop into cancers, right? So if you have enough senescent cells, at some point they will start overgrowing without any stopping.
Control.
And that's what will become a tumor. In fact, so much so today's research tells us that 1 out of 9 people in India will have some form of cancer in their lifetime. So today, if we are 10 people sitting in the room, there is at least one person who will have cancer in this room.
Wow.
Right? So autophagy is a way to delay that process. Again, you will ultimately die, right? But it's a way to delay that process as much as you can. So when you fast every 10 days, 7 days, 11 days, I'm not saying you need to intermittent fast every day, right? But if you fast at least once a week or once in 2 weeks, it's a great way to replace that system again and again. You're trying to clean out your system as much as you can.
Right. And that's why I think a lot of the religions, like especially Jains, we were discussing this earlier as well, that they do these 30-day fasts, right? And it's like a complete detox for your body. And they have one of the longest living populations in the world.
No, absolutely. So basically, like and it's not just 30 days, it's about how many days you can do. Like people who are like very ardent believers, they do it up to months also. They do it for 2 months, 3 months, 6 months also. They just survive on water and maybe coconut water for some people. It's as long as you can do, because that's how you start. Like I think, I'm not 100% sure with Jen, it's basically leaving one material item every year. And they try and keep increasing their fasting days every year. So it could be 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. And that's how they live life. Right. And, because they feel that even breathing, like they'll wear those masks. Even breathing outside bacteria is bad, which really helped them in COVID times. But,
Right. No, talking about COVID times is when I started intermittent fasting myself. And I have been doing it, but I choose when I don't want to do it. And I give myself that freedom, right? I think we discussed earlier. And what I think I noticed was that even though I don't have any carbs in my body, even though I don't have any fuel, which is, helping me think smarter and think clearer, I don't have any brain fog in the mornings. I'm much more clearer in my thought processes, and I can ideate much better in the mornings, right? Until I obviously start eating post 12:30. And so that's been a very interesting experience for me. And even if I do a 12-hour or 14-hour fast, that persists. So do you have any advice in terms of what windows people should be focusing on in terms of the number of hours they should be fasting?
I think for me, again, I just draw back to listening to your body. I think that fast as long as you can. If you can't eat, but there are ways of breaking your fast. I think you should break your fast with either an MCT oil or ghee or coconut oil, because if you break your fast with carbs, you'll have a very sharp insulin spike. So it's very more than knowing how long to fast. It's about how to break a fast.
Right.
Because, usually, for most households, we ultimately end up doing a 10-12 fast anyway. Like if you're eating at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the evening, and then you wake up in the morning and have your breakfast at 8 or 9, you're anyway doing a 12, 13-hour fast naturally. In fact, Jains follow this law that they have to eat before sunset. So they naturally are intermittent fasting anyway. So I think instead of focusing on how long you should fast, I think you should focus on how you should break your fast. That's why it was called breakfast.
Right.
It's breaking fast.
Right. No, very interesting. And in fact, I think we have summarized intermittent fasting quite well for the viewer and the do's and don'ts. So let's move on to supplements, right? Today, the supplement industry is growing very rapidly. It's a slightly unregulated industry, but there's a lot of, clutter in terms of what is good for you, what is not good for you. There's a lot of research, but that research also is being twisted into different forms to suit certain narratives, right? So what I want to do today was just talk about a few supplements which you believe should be part of everyone's daily lives, and maybe some of which I believe, right? So starting with maybe magnesium, right? What are your thoughts around that? I've seen a couple of videos of yours where you talk about magnesium. So can you share your thoughts?
So before I talk about magnesium, like something that I'd like to speak about is supplements in general. So I think a supplement protocol is based on certain criterias, right? I mean, first we need to identify what are the things that your body does not get from the diet, or what are the things that you require specifically, or what are the things that is in your medical history that you want to delay. Like, for example, there are certain, if you're a vegetarian, you're clearly not getting enough omega 3, omega 6, right? So you need to supplement omega 3, omega 6. If you don't go out to the sun much, you need vitamin D, right, as a supplement. If you're again a vegetarian, you need vitamin B12 and B3 and B6 and B1 and B5, right? If you're not getting enough iron from your food, you need to get iron from your as a supplement. So I think the supplement protocol first is need based. What are the things that you don't get in your life? That's how you design your supplement. That's column 1. Then column 2, which is my favorite, is about reversing your family diseases. If you have, say, a history of brain illnesses in your family, right? In that case, you do nootropics, basically, which are supplements which help you hack your brain health, which delay your brain age, right? So then the second part, which the first part is essential, the second part is need based. What are you concentrating on? If you have a family history of cardiac health, heart attacks and blood pressures, then you have a different line of supplements. If you have a family history of mental illnesses, you have a different line of supplements. So basically, the second line becomes need based, and the third is desire based. When we talk about biohacking, that, usually in the toxic exposure that I live in my city, I would probably live till 75, 80. But if I want to get to 120, I need those NAD boosters. I need those biohacking supplements. I need those resveratrol. I need quercetin. I need fisetin. And those fancy supplements that will make me live longer.
Yeah.
So these are the 3 brackets that we fall into. Essential supplements, need-based supplements based on your medical history, and desire-based supplements, or what you desire. You want beautiful skin, have glutathione, right? So magnesium for me falls in the first column, which is basically need-based supplements. Essential supplements, because of industrialization of food and because of cleanliness and hygiene, we've lost magnesium. We clean our water. We used to find magnesium in water. We've cleaned up food. We make them go through a lot of hygienic processes, because of which we've lost magnesium in our food, right? Now, the second thing you need to know about magnesium is your blood tests do not tell you shit about magnesium, because magnesium, 99.6% of all magnesium lies in your bones and tissues, and there's no way you can test that.
Right.
Blood serum has only 0.4, 0.5, maximum sometimes 1% of your magnesium. Even if you get a normal blood test report on your magnesium, there's no guarantee that you have enough magnesium. The third thing is that magnesium is involved in 300 or more than 300 biochemical reactions in your body. So even if you take magnesium separately, which is a water-soluble element, which will only get absorbed to how much you need it, it's a great way to help all your biochemical reactions take place, because that's what forms your metabolism.
Yeah.
Your vitamin D will not circulate in your body without magnesium, and so many more examples. For me, my favorite supplement in magnesium is magnesium glycinate and L-threonate, which is basically, it goes through the blood-brain barrier and helps you think better, think smarter. Again, it also comes in, for me, in the nootropics as well. But at the same time, magnesium for me is one of my favorite supplements, because it is just required everywhere. It's like the most essential element. And then I would say vitamin D and B12.
Yeah. And even vitamin D absorption in your body is, again, I think you touched upon that, dependent on the magnesium levels in your body as well.
Also K2. So basically, it's a 3-part process. Once you get vitamin D, then it is absorbed from your gut to your intestine by vitamin K2. So a lot of people don't have vitamin vitamin D3 and K2 together, which will not help. You can have all the vitamin D in the world, but if you don't have vitamin K2, it will not go to your gut or your small intestine. And if you don't have enough magnesium, it won't circulate in your blood. So you need it's a 3-path process. You need vitamin D, you need to take vitamin K2 along with it, and you need to take magnesium at night to make it into a full chain circle. And you need to take it with fat, because these are fat soluble, vitamin D and K. So if you don't take fat soluble, it will get dissolved in water anyway. It won't help you.
But having it, say, after dinner is okay, right? You have enough fat
So
in your...
I feel like personally, vitamin D3 and K2 should be had after breakfast, and magnesium, because it helps you in relaxation and stress-free, should be had at night, because it's a 24-hour cycle. It helps you either way. So when you're having magnesium at night, you have it for a long time in your body.
Yeah.
So after breakfast, when you are having and by fatty food, you could even have it with omega-3, right? So say you're fasting, but you just want to have your supplements in the morning, you could potentially take omega-3 fatty acids, and then take vitamin D3 and K2 with it, and it'll suffice.
Yeah.
Because
So
you're having it with fat.
magnesium again, I recently started having about maybe a year back, and it took some time because I was questioning whether it's helping me or not. But I track my sleep when I'm sleeping, and the REM cycle and the deep cycle, I think, is deep sleep cycle is very important. And these apps say that you have to have about 33%. And I was consistently, when I was tracking it, maybe below 30, 28, 29. Sometimes when I've had a really bad night of sleeping, it's as low as 24 also, right? Or I've physically exerted myself and not got enough sleep, it's around 24. After I started having magnesium, on a good day, like on a bad day, it's still bad, I'm over 33%, my deep and REM cycle combined, right? So sleep, definitely it helps. I have glycinate, I think you
Glycinate,
pronounce. I have that 500 mg. And second thing which I notice is, especially if I have a hard workout session, or, play tennis the previous day, and next day, recovery is also much better. Right. So sleep and recovery are two things which I have noticed in my personal life. Can you tell me if these are actually correlated to magnesium?
No, absolutely. So magnesium, like I said, is involved in 300 biochemical reactions. It helps you in stress, your cortisol, your muscle repair, your digestion, your basically neurotransmitters. So it's involved in so many processes that it's just required everywhere. So I say that magnesium affects different people differently. Sleep is a very common, well-known factor that it affects. Having enough electrolytes in your body is another factor which is very common. But you'd be surprised. There's so many patients who come up to me and say that magnesium helps me in this way, in this way, in this way. You shouldn't be surprised if you hear how magnesium has helped different people in 100 different ways, because it's involved in so many processes.
Right.
But again, like a lot of times what happens is that with these vitamins and minerals, you don't get immediate effects. It's like workout, right? Like you're working out every day.
Definitely,
it takes time. It takes its own sweet time. And one day you'll feel strong. You won't even attribute it to magnesium.
Yeah.
It's like, when you're working out, like every day you don't come and say, oh, I lost just 1 kg after this one workout, right?
Yeah.
Like suddenly after 2 years or 3 years of workout, it's like, oh yeah, it made a difference. Look at my picture then and look at my picture now. It's the same thing with some of these essential supplements.
No, definitely. And omega-3, I wanted to touch upon. It's become obviously very popular, and most people are consuming it, but many people don't know why it helps us. So can you elaborate on that?
So basically, there are certain essential fatty acids. There's omega-3, omega-6, omega-9. And omega-3 and omega-6 are extremely important for our body in the form of EHA and DHA and EPA. And when we take omega-3s, basically it helps us sort of reduce the plaque from our arteries. Like it keeps our heart healthy. Like it keeps the circulation of your heart better. It's extremely good for cardiac health. It's extremely good for fertility. It's one of the essential fats that your body needs for, again, a lot of processes in the body. All the processes that require fat require omega-3 and omega-6s. And that is why that, again, it's a very essential element
Right.
to your body.
Right. And also, omega-3 supplements usually are, the most popular ones are fish oil.
Fish oil.
So there's an entire vegetarian population, like me, for example, we rely on vegan omega-3 supplements. So what is your take? Is it as effective? Because generally it's, I think, derived from algae, if I'm not mistaken. And the one which I take, one of my friends' brand, Raw RX, has ALA, EPA, and DHA, if I'm not mistaken. So does it have all the three elements usually? And
so again, it depends on what enzymes they've chosen to extract the bioavailability of that product. Like you said, actually the omega-3 is found in the seaweeds and sea algae. Fish eat it. Fish easily convert it into bioavailable omega-3 in their fats. Fish. So when we have fish, the availability of omega-3 and omega-6s are it's right there.
It's
Because
much
they
more
converted the omega-3 in algae, which was not bioavailable, into available omega-3 and omega-6, right? And that's why we say the wild fish oil or the salmon fish oil is very efficient in terms of omega-3. Now, the algae does not in its own have bioavailable omega-3 that much. Now, the supplements that you're using, I obviously don't know about the exact composition and how they've used it, but sometimes they use enzymes and they sometimes use certain processes to make the omega-3 available just like a fish would.
Got it.
Right? So it depends on the process that they followed in the lab to sort of create that kind of supplement. But I do believe that there are a lot of companies out there which do have vegan omega-3s which are as effective.
Interesting. So now moving to the third bucket, desired supplements, right? So again, longevity and anti-aging is becoming very popular in the West and even in India to a certain extent. There are these NAD boosters. We slightly touched upon it earlier, but can you explain how important NAD is and the supplements that boost your NAD? What is your view on them in terms of research?
So basically, in a very layman's language, I'd first like to explain what NAD is, right? So it's nicotinamide adenine. It's basically a sort of a cellular pathway. So there is something called NADH, and they use a hydrogen ion to make NAD boosters, which produces good energy from your mitochondria. If you understand what the mitochondria is, it's a battery of your body, right? Every cell has a mitochondria, which is like a battery cell, right? Now, NAD boosters, what happens is, so with NAD, say when you're 20, I'm just using a very hypothetical number, this is not a real number. Say you have 1000 units of NAD plus molecules, which are effectively using your battery. Like when you buy a new iPhone, your battery is very efficient. But as time goes, your battery efficiency starts decreasing. The same thing is with NAD, right? Your NAD molecules start decreasing as you age. And because it starts decreasing as you age, the energy efficiency of your battery, which is your mitochondria, keeps decreasing. Right? Because that keeps decreasing, you start aging. Because you start losing more muscle, because you can't convert energy effectively anymore. Your child can have 10 ice creams and still be that skinny person in the morning. And you could, if you have those 10 ice creams, you'll put on 3 kgs the next day.
And is it a linear decrease of NAD levels, or it happens specifically after a certain age? How does it happen?
No, so it is I won't say it's linear, I would say it's exponential, and it's based on your lifestyle. Because even without the supplements or even without the NAD boosters, if you're working out really well, it's not a linear progression. It's very person dependent. Like Milan Soman, for example, he's 50, 60, right? He probably works out, God knows, few hours a day. He keeps running, keeps working out, right? And he has a body of a 30-year-old person, which means that the NAD boosters did not decrease because he used his body in a correct way, right? Something that we probably don't realize. So I think it's very lifestyle dependent. But the reason that NAD boosters have come along is because, again, people started desiring a better look, a better age, a better feel, right? Look, feel, function, right? Which is the cornerstones of longevity. Like, I want to look better, I want to feel better, I want to live longer, right? So because of that, these nootropics have come into place, these NAD boosters have come into place, because now people who already are looking like 50-year-old people at the age of 35 or 40, they now want to look like 20, 25.
Right.
And it's more about how they can biohack their way to get back to the same level as probably, say, Milan Soman is.
Yeah.
Right? It's a biohacking technique where you're using these boosters, you're sort of like, I don't want to use this word because I don't believe in it, you're sort of cheating because maybe you abused your body for the last 20, 25 years, but now you want to get back to that.
Yeah.
Right? And you want to start afresh. So it's, you're using these supplements to get back to that. Now, as far as the effectiveness is concerned of these supplements, I would say that on mice models and mouse models, they've increased the life expectancy to a very high level. But as far as human trials are concerned, there is a entry to barrier, which is basically, if you want to see whether it increases human life expectancy to even 1.2, 1.3 times, it'll take a person 70 years to keep taking the NAD molecules before you come to a conclusion.
Until they are maybe 120,
Maybe
150.
they're 120, 140, then it'll be like, and there are so many confounding factors. Was it just because of those NAD boosters?
Right.
Or was it maybe because they were healthy and everything?
Or they had purpose.
So it's exactly. So it's very difficult to sort of do clinical trials on this. I think it really goes on faith system, to be honest, if I'm being very honest with
No,
you.
makes sense. And that's what I believe, right? For example, I have NMN, quercetin, resveratrol. I don't know if it is a NAD booster, but I have that as well.
No, resveratrol again is in the cellular pathway where it's a sort of an antioxidant.
Okay, got it. So I have these three, and there is a lot of confusion, and research is very conflicting around these three supplements.
It's not enough either.
Yeah, it's not enough as well. But on a good faith basis, I have it because I'm like, what's the worst that can happen, right? And if there is something which is actually helping me, it could be monumental.
I think I personally feel that if you can afford it, you can have it.
Yeah.
It won't harm you. But as far as a larger population, if I had to tell them, then ideally people like us, probably I can afford it. So even I take it from time to time. I take it for a few months, take a break, take it for a few months, take a break. But I think ideally, if I had to give advice to a mass population, I would say focus on your exercising, focus on your eating, focus on the essential supplements first.
And the need base maybe. Yeah.
And need based maybe, and then maybe slowly get there once you see how you're looking, feeling and functioning after a certain point.
Yeah.
And then if you feel, because these desired based supplements are something you can't stop, right? Because if you take it for 1 year and then stop it, then 1 year's money has gone to waste. Right? Because these are desired based, this is something you'll have to take till death. Right? So if you're committed to take these supplements till death, then it's great.
Yeah.
Like I'm committed to take vitamin D till death, or vitamin B12 till death, or omega-3 fatty acids till death. And that's why I keep taking them every month. But with these supplements, like I know I take them for a while and I don't take them for a while. Like I sometimes forget to order it because, these are desired based.
Yeah.
So again, as a larger population, I would say that first focus on the essential supplements. And these desired based are certain things that very elite creme population can afford. And if you think these are something that you can take lifelong, only then commit to it. Because this will not work for 1 year.
Agreed. And only if you truly believe that it'll help you, not just because you're following the next person who told you it's
Absolutely.
helpful, right? Yeah.
And
so
you can't follow a bad lifestyle and take these supplements and that will help you.
Of course, that's a no-brainer. But yeah, that concludes the entire supplements portion of it. In one of your videos, I remember of Infinite Health, I remember you mentioning how glycation is a process which ages you, right? And glycation is essentially sugar in your body becoming brown, the way you cook it, right? And today, everyone is becoming very cognizant about glucose spikes, right? But can you elaborate a bit more on what happens when sugar goes into your body? And when I say sugar, I don't mean refined sugar, any form of sugar. Basically, if you want to call it carbs, let's call it carbs.
Glucose, basically.
Yeah, glucose.
Simple glucose.
And what happens when your glucose spikes? How does insulin come in and save the day, right? And when and how things start going wrong for you, which eventually leads to diabetes.
I think the first thing that you need to understand is how glucose works in your body, right? Now, when glucose works in the body, when glucose enters into your body, your pancreas have islets of Langerhans, which produces insulin, right? The job of insulin is to make sure that the glucose is entering your cell, right? Now, what happens is that insulin is like a key.
Yeah.
So when your glucose is there in the blood, your insulin comes and it opens your cell, and it acts as a key and it tries to open your cell. When it opens your cell, they try and make sure that the glucose goes in.
Correct.
Right? Now, if there is excessive glucose, all the glucose won't go in and your blood will have a high sugar volume. Right? However, if you're very effective in your glucose absorption, then even if you have, say, 10 bananas, all the glucose will be used by your cells. Because
or it'll be stored as glycogen.
Yeah, because you're that efficient in energy absorption, right? So that's what glucose spike or glucose intake means, and how glucose is related to insulin. Ultimately, glucose produces ATP or energy with the help of a mitochondria.
Yeah.
So it's when the glucose goes inside your cell, the mitochondria that I was talking about, the NADH converts into NAD+, and that NAD+ uses the glucose molecules to produce energy in the mitochondria. I'm sorry, I'm being a little technical. But
No, that's interesting, yeah.
And that's how energy is produced in the body. A lot of people have a lot of food and still feel lethargic, which means that they have some form of insulin resistance. It means that the key is not working properly. right? And because you feel lethargic after eating, you feel like eating more because your brain is like, my cells haven't got enough energy,
Right.
right? So that's the concept of glucose metabolism in a very short nutshell. Now, what glycation means is that if you see the cartilage of a baby, it's pure white. And if you see the cartilage of a 100-year-old man, it's brown. It's like when you cook sugar in a pan, it caramelizes from white to brown. In the
Correct.
same way, we are being cooked. That is aging.
Wow.
Your muscles are aging because of the sugar that you're taking slowly. Now, the intention is, again, everyone will get cooked. You cannot avoid glucose. Even if you are not having carbs for your entire life, your protein and fats will get converted into
Correct.
some form of carbs, because ultimately you need glucose as a function of life.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't matter whether you're having low carbs or high carbs. Ultimately, you will glycate. Right?
But
That-
how much you glycate
how
depends.
much and how fast you glycate. There are 30-year-olds who look like 50-year-olds.
Right.
There are 60-year-olds who look like 35 or 30.
And
You know,
is that just genetics, or it's also because of the amount of sugar they might have consumed?
so something that you need to know about genetics is that genetics keeps changing because your genes keep changing every year. It's epigenetics now.
Right.
Like that's why you can't clone a person, right? Like they tried to clone Dolly the sheep a long time ago. I don't know if you remember.
I remember, yeah.
But they couldn't clone them successfully because your genes keep changing. Your gut microbiota keeps changing. You move to the US, you will have a US gut microbiota, not an Indian gut microbiota. You will be more susceptible to heart disease and obesity. So, like, I know I'm sidetracking a little bit. Like, Japan is the third most richest nation in the world and has the least amount of obesity, only 4.5% obesity. Now, when Japanese people move to America, they have the same risk of heart attacks, obesity, and heart disease. Because the microbiome changes, because the genes change with the microbiomes, right? So in the same way, like genetics is something that we should put aside when we're talking about this. I think lifestyle here becomes
Plays
more
an
important.
important role.
So people who are working out more, moving more, again, see, there are so many instances of where you talk about mental health, where you talk about your parenting skills, because when, you always mimic your parents. If you see your parents healthy, active, their children will be healthy and active, at the end of the day. So a lot of nuances, but yes, ultimately, as far as glycation and aging is concerned, it's about eating well and moving well.
So one more question, Anand, I had around glucose spikes. I, use a CGM monitor myself, right? And what happens is when your glucose keeps spiking, you do not understand the data. You assume that glucose spike is a bad thing, right? So can you explain how a average user can understand glucose spikes, and when is it a bad sign, right? When is it a time when you need to start monitoring it and it leads to insulin resistance? And what is insulin resistance?
So, just to put it simply, when you have, say, glucose, let's say you have pure glucose in a glass of water,
Yeah.
right? Now, of course, you'll have a glucose spike, right? Now, the glucose spike will vary with a person of different muscle mass. Say, for example, if someone like, say, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Hrithik Roshan, who have good muscle mass, have the same amount of glucose that you do, their glucose spike will be lesser than yours.
Okay.
Right? So the glucose, because the more muscle you have, the better insulin response you have. And the better insulin response you have, they'll be able to control the glucose spike immediately.
Got it.
Right? So glucose spike in general isn't a good or a bad thing. It's just a thing when happens when you take glucose.
Which you can't avoid.
Which
yeah.
you can't avoid. It is as simple as that. Now, it is the length or duration of which the glucose spike is happening, right? Like if I have a piece of chocolate, of course my glucose will rise. There's no harm in it. I enjoyed a piece of chocolate or enjoyed a glass of glucose or whatever it is. And of course my insulin will go high, right? Then it is my glucose will go high. Then it is the insulin's job to make sure that glucose is going into the cells. Now, if your glucose is spiked for a long duration of time, that's when the problem happens, which means that your body is resisting insulin. Your body is not being able to actively use the insulin, because of which the glucose is high in your blood for the longest time.
And why does your body do that? Like, why does the insulin not? Is it because of abusing your glucose spikes and having multiple spikes because you're having processed foods? What do you think is the
I
reason?
think this is very nuanced research in
Yeah.
the sense that insulin can be faulty. Insulin can be overworked. Like again, like you said, if you're abusing yourself with glucose all the time, day in, day out, for years and years and years, your insulin is like, bro, I'm tired. I'm not going to do this shit anymore.
Right.
It gives up. And then because it has to produce so much insulin that some of it becomes faulty.
Yeah.
The key doesn't function properly. And that's why the problem is if a glucose spike is like this, then it's not a problem because your insulin acted fast. You had a form of glucose, it acted fast and brought down the glucose levels. But if the insulin spike is like this, then it's a problem because you're having a longer duration.
Yeah, and or if it goes down and then comes back up again. I've noticed that also.
So I think when you're moving, your insulin spike also goes up. That's a good insulin spike.
Okay.
When you're exercising, when you're working out, when you're moving, because the corollary of insulin is glucagon. When you don't have carbohydrates or glucose in your body, your glucagon increases the carbohydrate and glucose level from your liver.
Okay.
So that's good because your body is utilizing your glycogen in the body to make energy. So when you're exercising, you will notice that if your glucose spike goes high, then that's a very good sign, which means that your body is functioning correctly.
And it's using glycogen.
But if your body does not have a spike, it means that it wasn't fueled correctly now.
Got it.
That's why they say that in a fasted state, your body is not fueled correctly for you to do cardio.
Right.
Like no runner every runner or every cross-country runner, anyone who does cardio will tell you the amount of glucose they have before they start running.
Yeah, definitely. So people have become very conscious about the glycemic index of foods. People, for example, know that sugar has a very high glycemic index, whereas certain other type of carbs, and there are a lot of soluble fibers now available like FOS. We use that in our snacks all the time to sweeten things and also act as a prebiotic fiber, which has a much lower glycemic index. Like I think it's between 12 to 18, right? And there are versions of it which is even lower. So my point being that if glycemic index is something which you can avoid high glycemic index foods, but that's not going to be always possible because if you have a portion of rice or if you have a atta based roti, there is going to be a glucose spike. How can we control those glucose spikes better? For example, one thing which I do is have apple cider vinegar, right? Though I don't time it before a meal, I feel overall apple cider vinegar is amazing, right? I've seen benefits across, because of the same. So what is your overall view on controlling these glucose spikes? What are the methods we can use?
I think in terms of food, you're absolutely right. Apple cider vinegar is a great way to reduce glucose spikes. Because if you take it approximately 10-15 minutes, half an hour, even I don't time it to be honest. I sometimes have it with my salad. But yes, it's a great way to reduce your glucose spikes because there's something about that food which has low glycemic index and it controls the glucose spike to go too high. Okay. Right? So food-wise, I think that's a very good way to reduce glucose spikes.
Walking after a meal?
Yes, like just after you have a meal, like after a few minutes, not just immediately. After a few minutes, if you walk around for 10-15 minutes around your block or around your house or something like that, again, because you're also walking and your glucose is being continuously used for the energy that you need, right? So instead of having a very high spike, it'll naturally control your spike.
Right.
So I think moving, apple cider vinegar, and having low glycemic foods are the only ways in which you can have a lower...
One more way I've noticed which people employ is the order of the food that you eat. So you start with fiber, then have the fat and
glucose goddess.
Yeah, glucose goddess.
So yeah, I mean, she's right. But to be honest, again, like if you actually read the research paper, the difference is about 1 to 2%.
Oh.
To be very honest with you. Like even I saw her video and I was reading into it. I mean, if you actually see the values and data out of the research he's talking about, I mean, of course, 1 or 2% is not bad if it helps you in a mental way and because you feel fuller.
Yeah.
You feel fuller, probably. But as far as genuinely it is concerned, it's a very minor difference.
It's negligible. Yeah. Right. No, great. I think we have covered glucose. Let's move on to fitness. I know we touched upon it a bit earlier, but let's deep dive into maybe to start with strength training. I think you highlighted earlier how muscle mass is a great indicator of metabolic health, right? In many formats you did. So I want to focus a little bit more on that. So let's start with strength training.
So again, like before starting with strength training, like since this podcast has been about biohacking and aging, and like I said, muscle loss is aging.
Yeah.
As you lose muscle, your wrinkles come because your skin muscles go down. Losing
Collagen
muscle
levels,
is
yeah.
aging. So to delay aging, you need to keep building muscle, right?
And you lose, I think, 1 gram. Sorry to interrupt. 1 gram after the age of 40 every year, or
I'm not
1%. Sorry.
I'm not aware of the exact number, maybe
Right.
because it might be different for different countries and different people. But yeah, it depends on your lifestyle. I mean, of course, with aging, I'm not aware
It's
of the
inevitable
exact.
that you will lose
It's
muscle.
inevitable that you lose muscle because ultimately, see, when you die, you will have lost muscle,
Yeah.
right? God knows, with the new technology they create, they could have reversed some way. They could have a machine. Nowadays, they have those electronic machines which build muscles while you're sitting. But anyway, that's a different topic for a different day.
Yeah.
But as far as fitness is concerned, it's very simple. You have to keep building muscle to avoid or delay aging, right? That's number one. Number two is when you're talking about strength training, strength is the highest parameter for fitness. The stronger you are, the longer and the better quality of life you'll live, right? You could have lesser endurance, you could have a lesser VO2 max, right? Those things will not help elongate your life. Your longevity depends on the strength of your body, right? Like Dr. Peter Attia has these markers of strength, like, you need to do if you can hang for 2 minutes, if you can, sit in a
Grip
squat
strength is,
positions
yeah.
for 120 seconds. There are certain parameters that he has. Like if you're strong, then even if you have a lesser VO2 max, or even if you have a lesser endurance, um, you'll have a good long life and good accuracy of life. So for me, fitness is about strength building. When we're talking about fitness, there are very two important factors we need to consider. There's look and there's function, right? A lot of people choose fitness for looks. I think that's where they go wrong. They start eating too less. They start just jogging, running, walking. Like they start doing a lot of things that just make them aesthetically look good, right? I think fitness should come with the concept of strength, how strong you feel, right? And that comes with both food and fitness,
Right.
right? I think looks should come second. For me, that's what fitness is all about, because you don't always need to build a six pack. You can't always look like a god. You can't, because all those people who have those crazy six packs are under immense amount of pressure and stress to look that way. Like, I saw this interview by Ritik Roshan who said that I look this way 2 weeks a year,
Right.
and it takes an immense amount of struggle and, it takes an immense amount of deficit
Right.
to create that out of your body, which we have started considering as an ideal, and we give up if we don't get to that ideal. I think fitness should aim for a strong body, maybe with a good, decent VO2 max, maybe with good endurance. And I think that's what fitness is summed up.
No, makes a lot of sense. And for the audience, if you can elaborate a little bit on VO2 max.
So VO2 max is basically the amount of oxygen that you're inhaling and the amount of carbon dioxide that you can hold in your body, which sort of strengthens your endurance system in your body. So it's basically a breathing measure. Basically, the amount of carbon dioxide or the long breath hold you can take, the stronger you are.
Right.
Because there are athletes who practice deep breath holds, because that builds endurance inside them. So when you're doing something very fast, a person with a higher VO2 max can go a certain length higher or certain length faster or certain strength parameter faster than someone with a lower VO2 max. So there are these divisions. I'm not extremely aware of them, but there are these divisions where if you have a certain level, then you're in the top 1 percentile of VO2 max, then top 10 percentile, top 20 percentile as such. Again, VO2 max is to do a lot with endurance and a lot to do with strength also.
Understood. Let's talk about a typical workout regime that you would personally recommend someone who, again, doesn't want to obviously get a six pack, but wants to incorporate the important facets of strength training and heart health. What do you recommend?
I think a mix of everything.
Okay.
I think zone 1 is as important as zone 2, is as important as strength, is as important as sports.
And just explain zones.
No,
in terms of
absolutely. So
cardio.
basically, zone 1 and zone 2 are basically your heart rates at which you need to exercise. So, like, zone 1 is when you're walking on the street. Not in Bombay. Bombay zone 2 only all the time. But like if you're walking in a place like Calcutta or in some other city where people walk in a very relaxed manner, that's zone 1 where you're walking very leisurely without any effort. And zone 2 is basically when you're walking a little faster, like say with a heart rate of 60 to 70% of your maximum. So if your maximum heart rate is say 210, then you minus 30 from it and then take 60% out of it, which comes up to for most people around 105 to 120. So if your heart rate is between 105 to 120, you're in zone 2.
So you can have like a conversation while...
Yeah, so like say you're walking on a treadmill at 6, it's not like you're comfortable, but you can still have a conversation. You'll be a little out of breath, but you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right? That's zone 2. And then after zone 2, I think endurance building and strength is also important, but all of this should be, I feel personally, done with a sport also. Like you should just pick a sport.
Yeah.
I know it's a very weird statistic that people who play tennis and racket games have a 7 years longer life than others as a
I was just going to bring that up,
Yeah, so I don't know the methodology of the research.
I think it again comes down to the muscle strength that you build. Again, I play tennis very actively, maybe 3-4 times a week, right? The muscle strength that you build and the zone 2 plus zone 5 cardio that you get in the process is, I think, the combination
factor.
And that's why a lot of people, like, the most popular sport right now is paddle and pickleball, right? I mean, getting a court in Bombay for paddleball is next to impossible, right? It's become that popular. And the West, obviously, pickleball and paddleball have been around for a while, but they are at peak popularity. And that's what people are saying, that it may be a great thing because, one, social engagement. It's getting people together to play. You need 4 people to play. Second, again, racket sport. So it helps from an anti-aging perspective. It helps you build the right muscles and leg strength. Because again, I think leg strength is also very important from a longevity standpoint, right? People who get fractures after the age of 70, 80 have a very high risk of death, right? So I think that's what's very interesting about racket sports. And I'm lucky to be playing tennis. I obviously discovered this post facto, but I agree with you there.
No, so, like overall for fitness, I have a very simple thing. Keep moving after you eat, which makes sure you're doing zone 1.
Yeah.
Try and make some time out for a leisurely walk, which is slightly brisk walk, at least once a day or at least 2-3 times a week.
Yeah.
Make it a part of your routine. Try and play sports for 1 or 2 days a week minimum, and try and lift weights at least twice a week. Right? So again, it doesn't necessarily have to be in the gym. Like, you could buy just a set of kettlebells and, do kettlebell swings and some cleans and some press for 2 days a week.
Yeah.
You could be playing tennis 2-3 times a week. Zone 1 could even be your stretching that you do every time before your tennis. Like, stretching and just doing those
warm-ups, basically.
And then, basically, for me, fitness is about making something a part of your life. Like, wake up in the morning, I'm going to play. Like, stretching before. You're doing zone 1, you're walking around. You're playing something, that's zone 2, zone 3.
Right.
You're building your endurance, you're building your strength. 1 or 2 days you do some strength training because you just want to build your core well. Some days you do plank. I think just mix it up. Like, keep doing something every day, because if you keep doing different things, you'll ultimately see that you've crossed everything.
Got it. Coming to fitness trackers, and a lot of tech accessories people have started using. What is your take on that? I mean, I personally use them and I find them very productive, but there are times where it tricks your brain into getting a bit demotivated, I would say. Because if you don't get the dopamine kick of that activity level going up, you feel like you have not been productive that day. But you can't be productive every day, right? From a fitness standpoint. So what is your take on that?
So you're absolutely right. Like, even though I'm someone who believes in biohacking and someone who's trying to biohack my life into a certain age, I think with fitness trackers, I have a very dual mentality. I feel for short term, they're good. Like, I mean, they're good indicators of where you're going and where you're at in terms of your fitness, in terms of activity. But I don't think you should make a habit out of them. Like, in the sense that if you see, I used to wear these Apple Watches for the longest time. I think for my mental health, I removed them. Because like you said, you become addicted. It's almost like falling in love with AI.
Yeah.
Like, if your AI is not satisfied, where they don't reach to a certain level, you feel disappointed every day.
Yeah.
So I think for a short time, just to see, like, I feel like you can use them while you're playing. You can use them for an hour while you're doing something to judge what is the value add that you're trying to get.
Yeah.
But once you get a certain number, I think you should just go with it. Like, I think these are useful short term. For long term, I think they're really bad for your mental health, as per se.
Yeah.
But yes, people who are in athletics, people who are in sports can definitely do that for sure. I mean, it's very helpful for them. But again, like here as a podcast, I'm speaking in terms of a general mass.
Yeah.
I think you can use it short term, but long term, I think your mental health becomes disappointed because you know what? You create very high standards for yourself to please the watch or
Right.
please the phone or please the app. And then you end up disappointed because you can't please the watch anymore.
Yeah.
So I feel, again, like just to summarize, short term use it, get to know what kind of values you're getting, because these are also not exact values. These are based on the light, red, infrared like technology that
Yeah.
you're using on your pulse.
And in
Yeah.
fact, they say that it's probably one of the most ineffective places to actually get accurate data.
Yeah. You need to put it across your
Yeah.
heart. There are these devices where you
Yeah.
put it across your chest and you get the correct values.
Right.
But anyway, like again, having said that, even for that, I feel like no matter how accurate your values are, these are good indicators when you're playing sport, just to get to know, like if that's something you want to know.
Yeah.
Right. But I think, again, like for me, fitness and movement is not about calculations. It is about, again, thriving and feeling strong. I think because, you know, your days will change, your ecosystem will change, people around you will change, and it's just a process that you need to make a habit out of, and that comes from here.
No, completely agreed. And okay, so fitness, I think a very good set of takeaways we could summarize. So maybe let's move on to something a little more, intriguing. Nowadays, anti-aging is going to, very interesting points, right? Like I'm sure many people have come across Brian Johnson and his entire blueprint program, and there is obviously, Yoba Mate, which we both have been discussing in the last couple of weeks. So, why don't you share some thoughts around these topics?
I think the way the world is moving ahead, they're creating a lot of devices, technologies to sort of make humans live forever. You know, I mean,
And that's what people are calling medicine 3.0 to a certain extent, right?
exactly, like these peptide molecules are taking over the pharmaceutical market. Like Ozempic is actually a peptide.
Yeah.
Right? It's a natural molecule that has taken over the world. Like, like Novo Nordisk is minting money like anything. Their stocks have gone up God knows how high.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's becoming an alternative to bariatric surgery, right?
Yeah.
It's helping people living longer. There is something called Ozempic babies. 50-year-old women are having babies because their fertility is becoming so nice.
Wow.
So I feel with all the technologies that are available and all the things that people are trying to do, people are trying to hack into health in a way where we can have a better quality of life. For me, biohacking is essential for a better quality of life. For me, the exact number doesn't really matter. When you say 100, 120, while we can live that long, I feel no matter how long you live, your quality of life needs to be higher, because when you're older, we see so many problems. Like, even if someone's living till 110, like they might have 30 years of pain and suffering. My intention or my area of expertise when it comes to biohacking is basically trying to have a better quality of life. And whatever does that for you, whether it's supplements, whether it's these drugs, whether it's these peptides, whether it's this wearable technology, whether it's AI trying to diagnose your diseases early in life. Like, we've been working on so many AI diagnostic tools to detect, brain cancer, eye cancer, diabetes, diabetic retinopathy, like through, different imaging scans, skin aging. I think all these tools are very important, but I think they should focus on improving the quality of life, because longevity would depend on the person itself, I feel.
Sure. No, that's very interesting. And what do you think about AI? I think that's going to be a game changer for most industries when it comes to longevity, anti-aging, and biohacking. Where do you see AI playing a role?
I think AI has to be treated as a friend and not as an enemy. But there will be people who use it as an enemy. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, I remember there were so many politicians, revolting against computers being brought to India because they thought that they will take our jobs, right? And today we are talking about a digital India,
Yeah.
right? So I think technology will come irrespective, right? AI will come irrespective and it will come everywhere. Now, how you use it, how you utilize it is on you. Like today we use computers, we can't live without it. I mean, this whole session is based digitally, right? I mean, the questions that you're asking is from a digital computer, right? Everything that we are doing is digital.
Yeah.
AI has to be taken advantage of as a friend. And I feel that it can help a lot because if you actually see the doctor to patient ratio in India is pretty bad. Like, one doctor to some 10,000 patients or something. So, you need AI to help you get to the masses. You need AI to sustain your life. In fact, if India needs to be a Viksit Bharat by 2047, I mean, you need the help of AI to increase the growth from the current 7.58% to 12.5%.
Yeah.
Because if we need to be at par with the US and China, we need to grow at 12 to 13% per year. And that 12 to 13%, that difference can only come from AI.
Interesting.
So I feel that whether it's your longevity, whether it's quality of life, I'm sure that there will be people who use AI in a bad way. And of course, there are dangers of AI and we need protections and rights and everything of that sort. But I think AI can also be used as a friend, especially in this field where uh, we have such complicated structures.
Right.
And it's impossible for a human brain in its active form to understand or correlate two different factors. So I think AI would be a great friend, at least in medicine.
Interesting. And any other technology or any other biohacking tools you believe we have missed discussing and you would like to talk about with
I
the
think just
audience?
talking about, I think as a world, we are a very stressed world. I think we have seen the COVID pandemic. We are defined by stress. We have become we have accepted that we can die at any given point of time because of the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
We saw so many deaths that as a nation, as a world, we have accepted that we are about to die at any given point of time. I think biohacking in terms of stress is something that is really coming up in terms of nootropics or in terms of ketamine therapy or depression, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, ADHD, because dementia and Alzheimer's is increasing at an alarming rate of 20% per year. Like we are becoming senile at an age of 40, 45, 50. Early age dementia is setting in by 40, 45. People are forgetful, anxious, have adult ADHDs. So I think some technologies that are using certain biohacks to increase brain health are extremely important, and I really hope they grow with time.
Wow. No, very interesting. And what an episode it's been. I think we have had some really great discussions, really great insight. I'm sure the audience and the viewers are going to take away a lot of important points. I think I'm going to surely be a Infinite Health fan for
Thank
the
you so
coming
much.
future and hoping to have more such conversations with you in the future. Let's stay in touch and thanks a lot for everything today.
Aditya, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. We've discussed so many things. I hope this works for you. And yeah, I hope that audiences take something away from it. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us on the second episode of Balanced Bite. We are thrilled to have you as a part of our community. If you enjoyed the episode, do like, comment, share, and subscribe to stay updated on future videos. I'll see you in the next one.